I'm John Baunach. I am a graduate student at Vanderbilt University, and I am a health physicist, or working towards one. We focus on protecting humans and the environment from the harmful effects of radiation while permitting their beneficial uses, such as nuclear power, nuclear medicine, and so forth. It's one of the only things in the universe that humans can't see, taste, smell, touch, hear. We can't find it with our senses. And so the problem with radiation is not that it's not dangerous or that it's too dangerous or that, but we carry that fear of the unknown with us into every conversation. And I think the most important thing we need to do is work to rid ourselves of that fear. Come to understand it, better come to understand its pros and its cons, its, the innate quality that we live in a world bathed in radiation. And that scares some people, but there's nothing we can do about it. And it's always been that way, and it will always be that way.
I even was paranoid about microwave ovens for a long time, and I'm not really sure where that came from other than watching Threads when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, we say microwaves, we nuke it, It's not as bad as you think. Let's look under the bed together. Let's go into the closet and see the monster. Let's, understand that it's not whatever your nightmare is. Some people will say that we're being flippant or we're ignoring facts, and so that's why I'm so careful to not dismiss what I think are concerns. But there are things that shouldn't be concerns. Very low levels of radiation, that's not it's not something we can control, and I don't think that is something that we need to worry about. My understanding has kind of grown to that. I used to be afraid of the idea of radiation because I didn't know what it was, and why don't we just use clean energy, and why don't we do these things that they're bad, but I know what they are, and the devil is better than the one you don't. The more people understand about radiation and nuclear and what it is actually they should be afraid of, the more they'll be comfortable with it. Yeah, I think everybody comes to the table with these preconceived notions of what is and isn't okay. And I think before you can even have a rational discussion, we have to all kind of throw away those preconceived notions and really come together and figure out what is true and what isn't true about the dangers of radiation.
My last project I kind of threw out there was I guess an analysis of Helen Caldicott talking about radiation, which is quite a thing if you watch a lot of her talking about it. And she does play up the silence and the no smell and the no taste of it, right? Not so much from a sciencey perspective, but maybe from a communications perspective. And it seems like it's a very tough debate to have to try to quantify the danger, because right away it's like you have the other side saying you can't taste it, you can't smell it.
Any argument that has to appeal to fear and has to appeal to the unknown is not as strong of an argument as one based in knowledge. That's just a fact. If you have to appeal to people's fear of the unknown in anything, nuclear or non-nuclear, you're looking for an emotional response and not a logical one. And so many decisions made emotionally are bad decisions, and I think we need to be more logical about energy choices and about nuclear power and about renewable. I think we need to be more logical about these decisions in a lot of ways. When people come out and they talk about the inability to sense it with, without a Geiger counter or something there, we can't win that argument if that's an argument, and we're never going to be able to sense it, I don't think. But I think it needs to go beyond just mentioning that, you can't see it, you can't hear it, like it's the invisible killer, and say, okay, well, it's invisible, we know that, but how dangerous is it? And kind of own the fact that we can't see it, but we do know a lot about it, despite not being able to sense it. And I think that's one of the greater triumphs of nuclear power, is to take this unknown quantity that 100 years ago you never would have imagined existed, and I think we control it, just the way that we control coal or wind or the sun. I think we've learned to harness this power, and I think a lot of people are afraid of it because maybe the science is more than they're comfortable with. You have to have a physics degree, and you have to really be a scientist or an engineer. You have to be one of those guys to get nuclear power. And I think what this conference and what anyone who feels strongly about thorium needs to do is translate it. We need to take it away from the specifics of, which Hastelloy alloy are we going to use for the lifter, or is the integral fast reactor better? We need to take it away from that. We need to step back, because the layperson doesn't care about that. What they care about is this going to harm me? Is this going to harm my family? You need to convince me that this is better than coal. You need to convince me that it's better than waiting for solar to catch up, or wind, or geothermal. I think people want to be safe, and they want to be safe, and then they want energy. And you have to address that need for safety if you want to win an argument with nuclear.
Well, Helen Caldicott says every dose of radiation is dangerous, so she's not conceding anything.
Linear no threshold is a regulatory model that we use, and for a lot of reasons, it's not the worst model you could have. I think it's better right now to be more safe than sorry. I think that as our understanding goes up, perhaps it'll be modified. But I think it's a little disingenuous to talk about 3 million deaths in Fukushima when you perhaps blatantly ignore the radiation emitted from coal plants, which is orders of magnitude higher than any nuclear plant, or orders of magnitude higher than Fukushima Daiichi's emissions. I think people have a tendency, when they talk about nuclear power and when they talk about the dangers of nuclear power, to separate it from the context of the world that we live in. I think maybe it's because it's that unknown thing. We look at nuclear deaths as deaths on top of the world that we already live in, when in reality, how many lives have been saved from not burning the coal that the nuclear plant replaces, is what it is. I'm one of the younger health physicists. There's a gap between the older generation from the 70s and 80s when we were building nuclear plants, and then there's the up and coming 20s and young 30s. And we're not as, bound by the old regulations. I mean, we still follow them, but our school of thought has come in the 21st century. And, while for the older generation it may be harder to imagine that linear no threshold is not the real world, I think a lot of younger health physicists are realizing that, there may be more to it than that.
Did you come in with a linear no threshold relationship understanding right from the get-go?
Well, the regulatory model is linear no threshold. There's no way to get around that. So you have to learn that that's at least the way of the world right now. My first introduction to LNT was an article that showed the pros and the cons of it, and I wasn't told which one was correct or incorrect. I was told to make my own decision and base my thoughts on the paper and the evidence. And I thought I think I actually came out first pro LNT, and just based on that one article. But I was never told that I had the right answer or the wrong answer. And so, when I was asked, is this right? He goes, I don't know, is it? Keep looking, because that's the important thing, is that you keep looking at the evidence and you keep making that decision. And so since then, I went from, LNT is, that's what it is and it makes sense, to, I understand the history of health physics, and maybe that's, a little overprotective, but, that's okay, to, okay, maybe we fundamentally misunderstand what's going on at the cellular level. And LNT is an easy explanation, but it's not the most correct. So it has been a slow evolution of coming to terms with LNT and where it is and how true or not true it is. And I think that has to do with the wisdom of the advisors. And Mike Stateman's not the only one that'll do this. I think the older generation realizes that we need to be able to think for ourselves and make these decisions. And they're doing a really good job of preparing the next generation of radiation protection specialists. And
what drew you to this?
Well, I wasn't drawn to it. I was actually a high school teacher. And I did it for a year and a half. And by the way, that is by far the hardest job I'll ever have in my life. But I loved it. And I went to Vanderbilt as an undergraduate, and my old advisor said, there's a new program here, we've got money for it, and I think you'd be interested in it. And I met Mike Staben at the Starbucks I was working at too, while teaching. And, after this, he said, I think, you can do this if you want. I think it's a really rewarding field. And I was much more of a theoretical physicist at the time. I really loved I would be fine with a broom closet, $30,000 a year, and a pad of paper. I would love that job. But I thought, this is good. I want to keep learning. I want to keep going. And I hated the biology at first because, like I said, I love the physics and the simplicity, and biology is so muddy and complex. But the more I got into it, the more there was an elegance to it. The more there was a subtlety that isn't in the harder sciences. And I think it's made me a better scientist in general, because I've had to, learn that, not everything is black and white. And in the real world, you have to make informed decisions based on what you know now. You may never know the real truth, but you try to make the best decision you can. But yeah, I was drawn towards that, and I didn't really want to go the medical route, and I was interested in the environmental. And I actually ended up working for my thesis with NASA, doing space radiation shielding. And that's been really exciting. But I also, while I was doing this, I worked with some nuclear environmental engineers, which introduced me to thorium. And I worked on the fuel cycle, understanding the, health benefits and risks of that. And I think I saw your videos, and it was one of those, after enough times, I went back to my roots of loving renewable energy and sustainable energy, and I said, this is, something I want to do. This is something I want to be a part of.
You have an interest in renewable energy as well?
Yeah, I've always been a fan of sustainability, self-sustainability. I'm a homesteader. I don't know what it is, but the idea of having a house where, everything is mine, the electricity is mine. I grew in high school. I would draw schematics of a house with solar panels and wind and just whatever a young, naive high schooler's dream of renewable energy. I don't know. It probably has to do with my upbringing, just the idea of leaving no trace and making the world better. I love the idea that I can make no impact or make a positive impact. And so even from high school, I was always interested in self-sustainability, and I came to Vanderbilt, and I was actually a political science major because I wanted to do something with renewable, or something, to kind of fix where we're at. Decided I should probably know a little more about what I want to fix before I just jump into politics or anything like that. And so that's when I switched over to physics, and I fell in love with it. Fell in love with the theory for a couple of years, and health physics kind of brought me full circle with nuclear. Yeah, I've been involved in just about every renewable you can imagine: solar, wind, hydrogen.
Were you pro-nuclear when you were younger, or did you have any strong feelings one way or the other on it?
I was agnostic. I was a nuclear agnostic. But I thought on the individual level, I was thinking about, well, my house doesn't need nuclear, so why does it matter? And it wasn't until you kind of step away from that naive one person shell and look at the world and say, well, 300 million people in America, we can't all live like this. So while it's nice to have this little shell in my own little sustainable world, what is a bigger solution? And you continue to be drawn back to nuclear, and that's nothing against solar or wind or geothermal or hydroelectric or hydrogen. And I am a big proponent of a lot of those, and I think they should continue to be developed. But if you want to stop the path we're on right now, and if you want to halt this inexorable march towards wherever global warming is leading us, we can't wait on renewables. We have to do something. And unless you want the entire world to give up the 21st century and go back to being pastoral farmers, and we lose that connection, we can't reduce, reuse, recycle enough to curb this. It's too little, too late. And I think in Pandora's Promise they talk about how coal is not only the largest source of energy in the world, it's the fastest growing. You know, it's getting worse and worse every year. And so as much as I love solar and all these renewables individually, and I think they should keep going, you look at that and there's no way to catch up with that on a renewable scale without nuclear. And that was what really sold me on nuclear, even before I knew how safe it was. It started out as kind of a necessary evil, and then the more I learned about it, the more it's actually not that evil at all. It's just necessary. And so I've spent, the last 2 or 3 years trying to explain that to people, the environmentalist friends that I have, with some success actually.
In a nutshell, what do you think we're doing wrong right now? Like, what is our emphasis, and where should our emphasis be?
Who's we?
I guess policymakers. It seems like there's a lot of people who want to do what Germany's done, and maybe there is a disagreement about whether that's a success story or not.
Germany is an interesting case, and it killed me because as soon as they shut down the nuclear plants, we all knew what was going to happen next. And like I said, I'm a fan of renewable energy and bringing it online, but when you look at the base load of that country and the electricity they need, you can't get by on solar and wind. And sure enough, they had to open, 13, 14 coal plants again, or natural gas or something. They had to go back to the old way of doing it, which it's just a shame. I hope they change course in the future.
When I heard that they were shutting down the nuclear reactors, I was just like, well, has a country ever done this before? They had a clean source of energy, they had a safe source of energy, like they have their own stats on fatalities, right? That was a safe source of energy that they shut down because another country effed it up.
Yeah. I think I'm very much, I have a German heritage, and I saw that, I told someone, that is the most un-German thing I've ever seen in my life. It was such a rash, emotional decision, and it feels like it has to be politics behind it. It has to be some sort of power play going on, or it's ignorance, and they don't understand the golden goose they had, because it can't be where they looked at nuclear and decided it was really unsafe. It sounds strange because it sounds like it's some huge part of me, but I expect it to wake up and be like, to see the news and realize, okay, well, they're restarting it now. It was clearly, it was a knee-jerk reaction. It was an emotional response. They regret shutting it down, but it'll all be okay, because no other country did this. And I wish I could think of an analogy, but I've never seen it before. It feels. Maybe this isn't the right analogy, but it almost feels in a way, after 9/11 here in America, there was that reaction. It was an emotional reaction. It was a very, it was based out of fear, and it was based out of ignorance, and it was based out of desire to do something. Because doing anything feels better than doing nothing, even if doing nothing is the right course of action. And I feel like that's what happened with Germany, is that what they should have done was nothing. They should have assessed their situation, they should have added safeguards, but completely shutting down a nuclear program that provided a significant portion of an entire country's energy needs is insane, is the only word to describe it to me. I still don't understand it, and I've tried to.
Well, they've been clawing down their greenhouse gas emissions, but it's just, I think over the last 6 years, they got them down 5% or something like that, and that's through using less energy is one of the primary means of achieving that. It just seems fixable. It seems like, okay, well, maybe you want to start the reactors back up, and then the advances you did make can go on top of all the clean energy from nuclear power.
Yeah, nobody in nuclear is going to say, no, spend all the energy you want. Like, reducing your energy consumption is absolutely something everyone should be doing. We use more than we need to, and it's great that Germany's taken that step. It's entirely unrelated to the question of nuclear power. You should absolutely bring this back on, because if you reduce the carbon emissions and then you bring on nuclear power, you're just going to reduce them even further, and that's the goal. So, yeah, I think that, and they want to bring up solar power and wind, and again, I'm one of those. Some nuclear people say, no, that's a waste of time, only do nuclear. I think diversity in an energy economy is a very important thing. I think we need electric cars, hydrogen. I think we need solar, wind, geothermal, hydroelectric. I think we need all of this in some proportion, but I think we need nuclear. I think that's going to be the backbone of an energy economy of the 21st century. But as far as, you know, the United States or Canada, or, you know, the Western world in general, our policymakers, what should we be doing and what should we be doing differently? Well, one, as constituents, we need to be much more vocal. If you want nuclear and you want thorium, you have to ask for it. Because if you don't tell your representatives that you want it, they don't know. And if they're pro-nuclear, great. If they're not, you have a chance to change their mind, and you need to change their mind. I've been told by a couple of congressional aides that they absolutely hear every person that calls in. You know, they take notes on what they say, what they think. So I think as constituents, we need to be much more vocal about what we want and why. Politicians just need the bravery to do that. And I don't have a simple solution because their world is so different than ours. I'm sure every action or inaction they do is justifiable in their minds. I think we're all human beings, and I think we're all trying to do good. But there needs to be a moment of bravery for, you know, maybe just one senator or one representative to say, you know, I need to put my job on the line, because this is, somebody needs to say how important this is, I think. And it needs to be someone who has the ears of other people who will listen to them. And I think there needs to be a tipping point. And I don't know when that's going to come. I hate to sound so pessimistic, and you know.
Well, I'm from Canada, right? Yeah. So our Green Party leader, I'm in the Green Party, but I'm, you know what it's like. Yeah. But it's they seem to see the problem as a human behavioral problem. I don't think there's an appreciation for technology as a means of solving problems. It seems that they come back to human consumption and consumerism and what's the word I'm looking for? But anyway, it's like human behavior is the problem here, and I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, I like idiocracy as much as the next person, but I don't think that's a representative of what the problem is, really.
Well, they say don't get in a relationship if you want to change the other person. I think if you're going into politics thinking, once I'm in power, I'll change the way people think and act, you're going to fail. Even if you get the power, you're going to fail. There's the only difference between us and people 100 years ago is that we have more available to us. We're still the same people. We have the same selfish desires. We have the same wants to be comfortable and safe and happy. And, you know, if they had YouTube, they'd lounge around and watch it all day too. There is definitely an era of this old golden time that we should try to go back to as a people, where we reduce and are sustainable. And again, I love that philosophy, but you can't force that on someone. You know, you can't force a way of life onto someone and expect there to be no resistance. So I don't think the correct way is going to be changing how people live. I think it's going to be using technology to respond to the way people live and say, yes, you know, we do consume more electricity, we do more work now, we travel more. This is an increase, and it's okay. Because the ironic thing is that as much as we want to reduce and reuse, we have the energy available here on Earth to do everything we want to do and more. We have not unlimited growth, but we have near unlimited growth for right now. And there's some disconnect between the public and the engineers here that are trying to do this. And you need more people willing to bridge that gap and have that communication. But yeah, I don't think it's going to come from changing people's lifestyles. We're all lazy. We're all inherently lazy, and that's if we change that, that's great and makes it easier. But I wouldn't bank on human nature changing without severe outside events making us. You know.
Well, that is the one of the lines of thought, I think, is that, well, you know, that people are going to realize global warming is a problem and they're going to change their behavior. when people realize global warming is real, then they will change their behavior?
People know that global warming is real. We're already there. I think I saw some in Scientific American, this last one, there was a poll about Americans who, whether or not you believe in global warming, and a vast majority in every state, I think it was a majority or a near majority in every state, thought that man-made global warming was real. And it's all in line with current scientific thinking. And then you get down to one question where it says, do you think global warming affects you personally? And it drops well below like 14% or something. And it's the tragedy of the commons is what it is. Have you heard of that?
But you can explain.
Yeah, no, the tragedy of the commons, some paper I read in a sustainable architecture class. It's the idea of the commons is where the farmers would take cows to pasture. They'd eat the grass there, and it's an open field. Everybody shares it, so it's a communal source. And you can imagine 100 farmers, they each have one cow. And they go there, and it's a very sustainable thing. The one cow eats 1/100th, a very small fraction of the commons. The farmer sees this, sees how sustainable he is, and he says, well, if I can do this with one, what if I have 2 cows? Because I double my profits, I double everything for me, and it's only a tiny increase on the commons. It's a tiny thing, so it's not going to hurt anyone. So he does it. The problem is that every farmer thinks like that one farmer. They think it's a big gain for me and a little, risk for everyone else. And so the tragedy of the commons is that everyone acting in their own self-interest produces this global problem. Global warming is not one person's problem. It's 7 billion people saying, oh, well, it's kind of muggy outside. I'll drive to the grocery store. It's a big gain for us and a tiny little expense, but if you have billions of people doing it, that's where we are. And that's why it's so hard to change human nature, I think, or that's why it's silly to expect human nature to change. Because rather than try to have 7 billion people all not do that, I think we should just increase the commons. Try to, anyway. So,
if we can successfully decouple energy from carbon emissions, what do you think that gets us?
Oh my gosh. I love that thought. I spoke about it yesterday. Is energy too cheap to meter?
Anti-nuclear people, they use that quote as saying how crazy nuclear people are. It's like they keep saying it'll be too cheap to meter, and then just look how expensive nuclear is.
I mean, we'll meter it because people love making money, and we'll make it back. But the idea that there could be so much, it's a vast, limitless supply almost. It does sound crazy. It doesn't sound possible. It doesn't sound real. And that's one of the things that took me the longest time to come around to, is that, it actually could be as good as it sounds. And, even if, let's just pretend that they don't meter it. Let's just pretend it's free electricity for everyone. Imagine what that does for the internet. In third world countries or developing countries, if everyone suddenly has enough electricity to have access to the internet, what would that do for global communication? What would that do for the global community? If you're once you have that communication, the world shrinks. And then, if you use these nuclear reactors for desalination, suddenly everyone has water and electricity. Well, we're growing food. That's another problem, but I'm not saying it would become a utopia, but we'd have a whole new host of problems that we can't imagine. But I don't think just because it sounds too good to be true means that we shouldn't try for it. I think, if we're not trying for free energy, what are we doing here? What's the point? I'm not here to, pad utility pockets. I'm not here to make money. I'm here because I love that idea of just being sustainable. And, it sounds a little hippie to say be in harmony, but, why not? I don't know. It makes too much sense to me. I have trouble understanding why someone would have a problem with it.
Can you clarify how more energy gets us to a more sustainable lifestyle?
The way I start with some people, if they're not environmentalists, if they're not, if they don't care about the deficit, if they're just like, I don't care, I want to keep doing it because I don't care about anyone else, I say, okay, well, what's your energy bill? 80, 90 bucks a month? Take that back. You have an extra 80 or 90 bucks a month. It's too cheap to meter. That would translate to less work that you have to do. Again, if we have the electricity, that's one thing that we no longer need to burn the coal. We no longer need to resort to fracking for natural gas. We have some sustainable form of electricity. We use nuclear power for desalination. Suddenly, places have electricity and clean water. After that, we have electric cars now. They're coming online with Google just releasing their self-driving car, with Tesla. Problem is the electricity comes from somewhere, so that may work, but if you want long distance cars, maybe you want hydrocarbons. Well, use the heat from the nuclear reactors, the same heat you're using for desalination, to produce dimethyl ether. Especially with nuclear and with thorium, all of these things start lining up where, okay, well, we can use nuclear for this, we can use nuclear for this. And nuclear medicine, we were talking about earlier, the radioisotopes we use for this come from nuclear reactors or linear accelerators. The problem is we're shutting down the nuclear reactors and we're not replacing them with new nuclear power. A lot of people don't realize that nuclear power provides a lot of the isotopes for our 21st century medicine. So if you want to be able to, use, I guess, the advances that we have in medicine, you're going to need nuclear. You can't get that from solar or from wind or geothermal. That's one of those necessities. There's just no other way to do it. You could do a linear accelerator, but why build a linear accelerator when you can also have a desalination plant and an electricity producer? You put them all together. And this is going to be one of those big problems in the next 10 years that people don't realize now, that once we start running out of medical isotopes, we're going to have a big shift back to nuclear. It's a matter of time at this point, unless we want to regress in our medical knowledge and our medical technology, which I don't think anyone wants to do. Again, we want to be safe, we want to be healthy. That's a very natural human instinct, and nuclear provides the means to do that.
Tell me how you feel about nuclear waste.
The volume of it is very exaggerated. Again, I didn't know this till I got into health physics, but when I hear nuclear waste, I imagine piles and piles and piles, like square miles of just, empty rocks that you can't walk near. In reality, it can take up the size of one football stadium a few meters high. That's all the nuclear waste in the world. And that blew my mind. I didn't realize this. So one, it's all concentrated. And every form of energy produces waste. Coal produces waste, we all know this. The problem is the pollution from coal gets dispersed. And I think it's one of those out of sight, out of mind. Nuclear, all the waste is concentrated right there. So while it seems like we have more, in reality, we're not releasing any into the environment, we just have it all caught right here. And in a way, it's like carbon sequestration, what we're trying to do now with coal and make clean coal. That's what we already do with nuclear. We have clean nuclear.
What do we do with the waste? Is it okay? Is the end game we just we put it in a repository and that's that? Because it seems manageable, but it also seems to make people uncomfortable. There's a million ways that stuff makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, nuclear waste is one of those fear of the unknowns. We don't know what radiation is. I hear that it's dangerous, and you want to put it in my backyard, please no. Or even put it in a mountain, hundreds of miles away from my backyard. And that's, again, I think people see this as, one person against another. It's all very natural responses to nuclear waste. It's all very natural to be afraid and be apprehensive. But it's not, it's definitely, I think, a manageable waste. I think we already have a great system for it. I would prefer that we don't leave the nuclear waste on the plants relatively unguarded. I think there are better ways to do it, but as it stands right now, it's not leaking into the environment. It's not poisoning anything. It's just there. So knowing that it's safe now, the question of what to do with it, France reprocesses its nuclear waste. With thorium reactors, we could reprocess the waste in the same way. The burner reactors, we put it back in, and instead of having large amounts of nuclear waste be unsafe for a couple 100,000 years, we'd have a smaller amount of waste that is unsafe for 300 years. And while that's still a long time, that's 7 generations. We can plan for 300 years. We could find a place and plan for 300 years of nuclear waste storage. And that could be a very sustainable thing. After 300 years, you take it out and you put some new ones in. It doesn't need to be a set it and forget it type of thing where, you set up posts for 300,000 years, no one can come here. I don't think that's a good way to do it. And I like that thorium provides the option to do it a better way. I'm very much in favor of burner reactors and reprocessing the waste at least a little bit. I think that people are worried that it's just going to be piles of waste, and that's not the truth.
If you have any points you want to make that you think I could make use of.
Do the research and look into that unknown. Look into what you think is scary. Look into that nightmare that is radiation and try to understand it. Try to understand what you should be afraid of and what you shouldn't. Because the more you understand, I can guarantee, because I did this, the more you understand about nuclear power, the safer you will feel about nuclear power, and the more excited you will be about thorium and where it's going and what it can do for our world, I think. So that's the charge. Go out and do,
Actually, yeah, that's the hardest part I've found with these videos is like the thing you kind of want to do is end with a call to action, but I've never had, I don't feel like I've got a lot of calls to action that I can pick from.
Yeah, I think, and that's, because everybody asks, this is great, what can I do? And what can you say other than, write your congressman? That sounds so stereotypical, but you need to do it, and I don't do it. I need to do it more. So I'm going to go home and do that at least once before you get these videos up. I'm going to do it once. And you need to make your voice heard. You need to understand more about it yourself, and you need to talk about it with people. I think you need to educate yourself on what's going on, because we talk about global warming and people will go round and round in circles and nothing gets done. And I think thorium, and I think lifters, and I think nuclear energy is offering an exit ramp on this roundabout of death. This circle that we go round and round. I think nuclear is over here saying there's an exit off of this where we can do it, but you need to feel comfortable. You shouldn't just go along with it and hope for the best. You should understand, you should want to take that exit ramp. You should want to get off and realize that global warming is not just something that's going to happen. Like, we can actively fix it. We can actively stop it and reverse it. And this is how we're going to do it. This is the only way to do it.